This is a video to walk you through the Physics ISN Test Part 1 and 2. This unit covered a lot of items, so this video will cover a lot of pages in the notebook. On page 36, you should have the cover Physics Part 1 motion. On page 37 is our completed table of contents with all of the labs, notes, and activities completed. On page 38 should be an envelope of your physics vocabulary, words, and definitions. On page 39, there's a motion reading and note-taking guide, complete from the notes front and back. And on page 40 is the speed versus velocity notes. This is the PowerPoint that was given for these notes. You, however, will have handwritten these notes in your notebook. On page 41, there is a warm-up called What is the Difference Between Velocity and Speed? And then we talked about the difference between miles per hour, velocity, and speed, and how to complete the four-step method when solving physics problems. This is all on page 41. On page 42 is calculating speed at any rate, where we did the lab where you ran around and calculated your heart rate and calculated the speed at which it beat. On page 43, there is a warm-up from March 3rd, calculating distance and speed, and then your marble lab conclusion with your sentence frames. Page 44 is speed of the marble lab. Page 45 is your average speed exit ticket and also a warm-up from March 5th, asking you to calculate the speed of an inchworm. On page 46 are your speed calculation notes. On 47 is the boat sketch from your land sailboat and also the conclusion questions from the lab. On page 48 is the engineer a land sailboat actual lab sheet. 49 was our land sailboat data. And on page 50, the reference page on notes about reference pages are on this page. On page 51 is reference points in real life. And on page 52 are the analyzing motion videos and reference points that we completed as a mini poster. On page 53 is a warm-up from March 11th on acceleration of the snowboarder, and also on page 53, hinge-shaped, is the motion packet. On page 54 are your notes on acceleration. Again, these will be handwritten. And on page 55 has, mine is blank, but you completed these conclusion questions from the velocity and acceleration lab of the different degree angles of the marble that we raced down. On page 57 is graphing types of motion. This we completed in the Google Drive. So this might be an empty data table, but you gave brief explanation of the movement of the graph. Because on page 58 are the graphing motion notes, where we took notes on what the graphs mean as they're moving. Page 59 was a warm-up for accelerating graph practice, and then a warm-up from 326 about the relationship between applied force and the distance an object travels. On page 60 was your acceleration problem practice, and on 61, your unbalanced forces. On 62 are notes about force, and on 63 are Bill Nye friction. 64 was friction reading and note-taking guide. 65, the physics of running barefoot. Page 66, the friction practice page. Page 67, understanding net force. Page 68, force notes. Page 69 was Curling with Kisses lab conclusion, and then page 70 was the lab sheet for Curling with Kisses, talk about friction. Page 71 was your drawing explaining shoe friction, and on 72 was the shoe friction lab. On 73 were the catapult rules, and on 74 was your data table for catapults. On 75 you did a scale drawing of your catapult, and then did the catapult write-up on page 76. On 77 started part 2 of physics, so our table of contents is there. The study guide will go on page 106, so we'll add that. And on page 78 was Newton's laws of motion, applying the 3 laws. 79 was your balloon car data and our write-up, and on page 80 was the lab sheet for balloon car, race car. Page 81 you had your design. Page 82 was the chart for Newton's 3 laws. Page 83 was the help words to help describe Newton's 3 laws of motion, and 84 were Newton's law review, where we went through the notes of how Newton's law apply to ordinary objects. Page 85 was our situations in practicing how to write Newton's laws, and then applying Newton's laws is on page 86. Page 87 was our potential and kinetic energy discussion and sheet, and 88 was our notes on forces in fluid. Page 89 was Bill Nye buoyancy, and your homework that was completed on page 98, which is interactive buoyancy. On page 91 was your boat design and also write-up, and then on 72 was the actual lab sheet for the boats we made out of duct tape and cereal boxes. On page 93 was buoyant force reading and note-taking guide, and 94 Archimedes principle description and write-up of your detailed science explanation of how the boats are buoyant and different types of fluid. On page 95 is the pressure notes that we took on how pressure and area affect our physical world, and then Bill Nye physical science for pressure on page 96. Page 97 are the pressure questions we completed in class. 98 Bernoulli worksheet, where we found the high and low areas. 99 were your conclusion questions and your write-up of your airplane that you built. And page 100 has the Bernoulli was a bird brain airplane lab describing air and fluid motion. Page 101 have two papers. It has friction and gravity and also flight and Bernoulli's principle questions. So you'll hinge tape both of those on. Sorry about the double take on that page. On page 102 are your gravity notes. And page 103, your gravity facts and myths. Page 104 was our gravity lab, where we dropped things from the second story and calculated its acceleration due to gravity. Page 105 is Bill Nye gravity. And lastly, on page 106, we'll add this to the table of contents. It is your physics test study guide. So please make sure all your labs are completed and everything is filled in, and you'll be ready for this ISN test.